The screaming started at exactly 6:47 in the morning. I know because I was sitting in my kitchen sipping real coffee for the first time in months, watching the digital clock on the microwave. Brittany's shrieks echoed through the house like a banshee's wail, and I couldn't help but smile. She had finally discovered what I left for her to find. For 6 months, I had played the role of the confused, helpless mother-in-law, while my son Marcus and his wife systematically destroyed my life. But last night, when she hurled that wine glass at my face and screamed that maids must obey, she triggered the final phase of my carefully orchestrated plan. Everything was about to change. My name is Angel, and until 8 months ago, I thought I had raised the perfect son. Marcus graduated top of his class from medical school, established a thriving family practice in our small Connecticut town, and married a beautiful woman who gave me 2 precious grandchildren. I was so proud that I sold my Victorian home on Elm Street, the house where I had raised Marcus after his father died, just to help him buy his medical practice. The sacrifice seemed worth it when he invited me to live in the guest house behind their colonial mansion. I should have recognized the warning signs immediately. Within the first week, Brittany handed me a list of household duties that read more like a job description than a family arrangement. Cooking breakfast for everyone by 7, preparing the twins' lunchboxes, handling all the laundry, maintaining the garden, and having dinner ready when Marcus returned from his clinic. When I gently suggested that perhaps we could share some responsibilities, Brittany's expression turned ice cold. "Angel, we're providing you with free housing," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "The least you can do is contribute to the household." Marcus nodded in agreement, barely looking up from his medical journals. "Mom, you know how hard we both work. Brittany manages her interior design business from home while watching the kids. We really need your help." So I became their unpaid housekeeper, convincing myself that this was what families did for each other. I woke before dawn to prepare elaborate breakfast spreads that Marcus would gulp down in 3 minutes before rushing out the door. I spent hours each week meal planning, grocery shopping, and cooking gourmet dinners that Brittany would critique like a food critic. The twins, 4-year-old Emma and Ethan, were sweet children, but Brittany rarely let me spend quality time with them beyond basic childcare duties. The real humiliation began when Brittany started hosting her weekly dinner parties. These gatherings featured her wealthy interior design club friends, women who wore designer dresses that cost more than my monthly Social Security check. Brittany would introduce me as Marcus's mother who helps around the house, never mentioning that I had been a registered nurse for 35 years or that I had sacrificed everything for their success. During these dinners, Brittany would snap her fingers to get my attention. "Angel, we need more ice water. Angel, clear these plates. Angel, bring out the dessert." Her friends would smile politely while I scurried around like hired staff, and I began to notice something troubling. I was forgetting simple things. Names of people I had known for years, where I put my reading glasses, the grocery list I had written just hours earlier. At first, I attributed the confusion to stress and exhaustion. Taking care of a household with 2 active toddlers while managing my own modest needs was overwhelming. But the episodes became more frequent and more concerning. I would start a conversation and lose track of what I was saying mid-sentence. I would walk into rooms and forget why I had gone there. Marcus, with his medical training, became increasingly worried. "Mom, I think you should see Dr. Patterson for a cognitive assessment," he suggested after I accidentally put salt in the coffee instead of sugar one morning. These memory lapses could indicate early-stage dementia. The word dementia hit me like a physical blow. I had watched my own mother struggle with Alzheimer's disease, and the thought of following that same path terrified me. But something felt wrong about my symptoms. They seemed to appear and disappear randomly with no clear pattern or progression. 3 weeks ago, everything changed. I was lying on the living room couch pretending to nap after a particularly exhausting day of hosting one of Brittany's elaborate dinner parties. The house had finally quieted down after the last guest departed, and I could hear Marcus and Brittany talking in the kitchen as they finished cleaning up. "The sedatives are working perfectly," Brittany whispered, her voice carrying clearly through the thin walls. "She's been so confused lately that even her old friends are starting to notice." My blood turned to ice in my veins. Sedatives, I forced myself to remain perfectly still, controlling my breathing to maintain the illusion of sleep. "Dr. Harrison confirmed that the dosage we're using won't show up in routine blood tests," Marcus replied, and I could hear the clink of dishes being stacked. "As long as we keep it consistent in her morning coffee, she'll continue to appear mentally unstable." "How much longer do we need to keep this up?" Brittany's tone was impatient, almost bored. "I'm getting tired of playing nursemaid to your confused mother." "Just a few more weeks. I need to document at least 6 months of cognitive decline before I can petition the court for guardianship. Once I have legal control over her finances, we can access her savings account and life insurance policy." The room seemed to spin around me as the full scope of their betrayal sank in. My own son, the child I had sacrificed everything to raise and educate, was systematically poisoning me to steal my money. Brittany, the daughter-in-law I had tried so hard to love and support, was helping him destroy my mental health for financial gain. I waited until I heard them go upstairs before allowing myself to process what I had learned. They had been drugging my coffee every morning for months, making me appear confused and forgetful to build a legal case for incompetency. Every stumbled word, every forgotten name, every moment of confusion had been artificially induced by the two people I trusted most in the world. That night marked the beginning of my transformation from victim to strategist. I realized that if I was going to survive this betrayal and protect what remained of my independence, I needed to become someone I had never been before. I needed to become calculating, patient, and utterly ruthless in my pursuit of justice. The next morning, I performed an Academy Award-worthy acting performance. I stumbled downstairs at my usual time wearing my bathrobe and slippers, looking appropriately disheveled and confused. Marcus was already dressed for work, gulping down his usual quick breakfast while scrolling through emails on his phone. "Good morning, sweetheart," I said with a bright smile, reaching for the coffee pot that Brittany had so thoughtfully prepared for me. "Morning, Mom. You feeling okay today?" Marcus asked, without looking up from his screen, the picture of concerned medical professional checking on his declining patient. "Oh, you know how it is," I replied vaguely, pouring the doctored coffee into my favorite blue mug. "Some days are better than others." I carried the steaming cup to the sink and waited until Marcus left for his clinic before dumping the entire contents down the drain. For the first time in months, my mind felt crystal clear. The fog that had been clouding my thoughts began to lift, and I started to see my situation with startling clarity. I spent that day conducting a thorough investigation of my own home. While Brittany took the twins to their swimming lessons, I searched through Marcus's home office looking for evidence of their conspiracy. What I found exceeded my worst fears. Hidden in his filing cabinet was a folder labeled Angel Parker, Medical Documentation, that contained detailed notes about my supposed cognitive decline. The records were meticulously fabricated. Marcus had documented conversations that never happened, medical observations of behavior I never exhibited, and even forged signatures on assessment forms that I had never seen before. According to his files, I had been displaying signs of severe dementia for over 4 months, including aggression, paranoia, and complete disorientation. But the most chilling discovery was a series of appointment confirmations for psychiatric evaluations that I had supposedly attended. Dr. Patricia Harrison, a psychiatrist I had never met, had apparently been treating me for progressive dementia and had recommended immediate placement in a specialized care facility. The appointments were scheduled for times when I thought I had been grocery shopping or visiting my friend Dorothy. I photographed every document with my old smartphone, making sure to capture clear images of Marcus's handwriting and the forged signatures. The evidence was overwhelming and terrifying. They had created an entire false medical history to support their guardianship petition. That evening, I prepared dinner as usual, making Brittany's favorite herb-crusted salmon with roasted vegetables. I set the dining room table with our best china and crystal glasses, creating the perfect atmosphere for what would become the most important performance of my life. Brittany had invited her interior design club friends for another of her monthly dinner parties. These women represented the social elite of our small town, the wives of prominent lawyers, business owners, and other medical professionals. They arrived dressed in their finest clothes, carrying expensive handbags and wearing jewelry that sparkled under our chandelier. I played my role perfectly, serving each course with quiet efficiency, while the women discussed their latest home renovation projects and upcoming charity events. Brittany basked in their compliments about the beautifully prepared meal, never once acknowledging that I had spent all day cooking and cleaning to make her evening successful. As the wine flowed freely throughout dinner, Brittany's behavior became increasingly demanding and entitled. She would snap her fingers when she wanted me to refill water glasses, clear plates, or bring additional serving dishes from the kitchen. Her friends seemed uncomfortable with her treatment of me, but none of them said anything directly. "Angel, we need more wine," Brittany announced loudly as I was serving dessert. She was already clearly intoxicated, her words slightly slurred and her movements unsteady. I walked to the sideboard and picked up the wine bottle, noting that it was nearly empty. "I think you might want to slow down a bit, honey," I said gently, hoping to avoid a scene in front of her guests. "We've had quite a bit already." Brittany's face flushed red with anger. "Excuse me, did I ask for your opinion about my drinking?" The entire table fell silent. Her friends exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly sensing the tension building in the room. I could feel my heart pounding, but I maintained my composure. "I just thought that maybe some coffee might be nice with dessert," I suggested, calmly trying to diffuse the situation. "I said I want more wine and I expect you to pour it." Brittany's voice rose to an almost shout. "You work for this family, and when I give you an instruction, I expect immediate obedience." I stood frozen, the wine bottle still in my hand, as Brittany's true nature revealed itself in front of her horrified guests. The mask of refined sophistication she wore so carefully had completely slipped away, revealing the cruel, entitled woman underneath. "Brittany, perhaps we should," one of her friends began nervously, but Brittany cut her off with a sharp gesture. "No, I am tired of being disrespected in my own home." She grabbed her crystal wine glass from the table and hurled it directly at my face with surprising force. I managed to duck slightly, so instead of hitting my face directly, the glass struck my shoulder and shattered against the wall behind me. Crystal fragments scattered across the hardwood floor, and red wine stained my white blouse like blood. "Maids must obey!" Brittany screamed, her face contorted with rage. "That's what we pay you for!" The silence that followed was deafening. Her guests sat in stunned shock, some with their mouths literally open in disbelief. Mrs. Wellington, the wife of the town's most prominent attorney, slowly set down her napkin and stood up. "I think we should be going," she said quietly, her voice filled with disgust. "Thank you for dinner, Angel. It was absolutely delicious." One by one, Brittany's friends excused themselves and left the house, their departure swift and awkward. I could see the social consequences of Brittany's outburst beginning to unfold immediately. These women would spread word of what they had witnessed throughout their social circle by morning. After the last guest departed, I quietly cleaned up the broken glass while Brittany stormed upstairs, muttering angrily about ungrateful hired help and disrespectful behavior. Marcus had worked late at his clinic and missed the entire incident, which was probably fortunate for everyone involved. But as I swept up the crystal fragments, I discovered something that would change everything. Hidden behind the sideboard where Brittany couldn't see me, I noticed a small jewelry box that had fallen from her pocket during her tantrum. Inside were 3 pieces that made my heart stop: my grandmother's antique ruby ring, my mother's pearl earrings, and a diamond bracelet that had belonged to my late husband's mother. These pieces weren't just valuable, they were irreplaceable family heirlooms that held decades of memories. I had kept them in my bedroom jewelry box, never imagining that anyone would steal from me. But here was proof that Brittany had been systematically robbing me of my most precious possessions. I carefully photographed the jewelry box and its contents before returning it to where I had found it. Tomorrow, I would begin the next phase of my investigation. Tonight, I would go to bed knowing that my enemies had revealed themselves completely and that justice was finally within my grasp. The next morning brought a terrible clarity that I had been dreading but expecting. I woke before dawn and immediately checked my jewelry box, confirming what I already knew. Besides the pieces I had found in Brittany's possession, at least a dozen other valuable items were missing. My mother's gold locket, the silver bracelet my husband gave me for our anniversary, even my nursing school graduation watch. All gone. I made myself a cup of real coffee and sat at the kitchen table, forcing myself to think like the registered nurse I had been for 35 years, rather than the heartbroken mother I was becoming. If Brittany was stealing my jewelry, there had to be evidence somewhere. People don't just make valuable items disappear without leaving traces. While Marcus showered and Brittany got the twins ready for their day at preschool, I conducted a systematic search of their bedroom. What I discovered in Brittany's walk-in closet made my hands shake with rage. Hidden behind her designer shoe collection was a small metal box containing shipping receipts, online auction confirmations, and photographs of my missing jewelry. The paperwork told a story of systematic theft spanning over 4 months. Brittany had been photographing my jewelry pieces, researching their value online, and selling them through various auction websites. The ruby ring alone had sold for $8,000. My mother's pearl necklace brought in $1,200. Item after item, my family's legacy was being converted into cash for Brittany's personal use. But the most damning evidence was a handwritten ledger where she had recorded every sale. Next to each item's description was a note about how she had acquired it: took while A was napping, grabbed during confusion episode, I won't remember having this. The casual cruelty of her notes was breathtaking. I photographed everything methodically, making sure to capture clear images of the shipping labels, auction confirmations, and that horrible ledger. Then I carefully returned everything to its hiding place, ensuring that Brittany would have no idea I had discovered her theft operation. That afternoon, while the twins were napping and Brittany was having lunch with a client, I drove to the public library to use their computers. I created an anonymous email account and began researching my legal options. What I learned was both encouraging and terrifying. Elder abuse in Connecticut was a felony offense punishable by up to 20 years in prison. The systematic drugging I was experiencing qualified as assault, while the theft of my jewelry constituted grand larceny. If I could prove that Marcus was using his medical license to facilitate the abuse, he would face additional charges that could result in the permanent loss of his professional credentials. But I also learned how difficult these cases were to prosecute. Elder abuse victims often made unreliable witnesses, especially when they had documented cognitive impairment. Without solid evidence and credible testimony, the legal system frequently failed to protect vulnerable seniors. That evening, Marcus arrived home with a cheerful announcement that made my blood run cold. "Mom, I've got some good news," he said as we sat down for dinner. "I've scheduled you for a comprehensive evaluation at Riverside Psychiatric Facility next Tuesday. Dr. Harrison thinks it would be beneficial for you to spend a few days there for observation." I managed to keep my expression neutral while my mind raced. "Observation for what, sweetheart?" "Just to get a better understanding of your condition," he replied smoothly. "Dr. Harrison is concerned about the progression of your memory issues. A few days of professional monitoring will help us determine the best treatment plan moving forward." Brittany smiled warmly at me from across the table. "It's really for your own safety, Angel. We love you so much, and we want to make sure you're getting the best possible care." I nodded agreeably while calculating how much time I had left. Tuesday was only 5 days away. Once they had me committed to a psychiatric facility, even temporarily, it would be nearly impossible to prove my competency or expose their conspiracy. I needed to accelerate my plans dramatically. That night, I waited until the house was completely quiet before conducting the most important search of my investigation. Marcus's home office contained his personal files, but I suspected there might be additional evidence hidden elsewhere. After 2 hours of careful searching, I discovered a fireproof safe hidden behind books in his study. The safe was locked, but I remembered that Marcus had always used the same password for everything Emma and Ethan's birthday in numerical format. The lock clicked open on my first attempt, revealing contents that exceeded my worst fears. Inside were bank account statements showing that Marcus and Brittany had already spent over $60,000 of money they didn't have. Credit card bills totaling nearly $40,000 in debt. Investment documents showing they had used their house as collateral for high-risk stock purchases that had failed catastrophically. But the most devastating discovery was a life insurance policy evaluation, showing that my death would provide them with $250,000 in immediate cash, plus the remaining balance in my savings account. Paperwork from the psychiatric facility confirmed that they had already paid a deposit for long-term care placement, with costs that would drain my remaining assets within 18 months. At the bottom of the safe was a folder labeled Treatment Protocol that made me physically sick. It contained research about medication interactions and dosage calculations for elderly patients with cognitive impairment. Marcus had been researching how to increase my sedation without triggering obvious medical complications. The most chilling document was a handwritten note in Marcus's medical script. Patient shows continued decline. Increasing morning dosage may accelerate timeline. Natural progression expected within 6 to 8 months. I photographed every piece of evidence with trembling hands, finally understanding the full scope of their plan. They weren't just trying to steal my money or have me committed. They were planning to kill me slowly, making it appear like the natural progression of dementia. The psychiatric facility was just a temporary step to establish my incompetency before the final phase of their scheme. As I returned everything to the safe and locked it carefully, I realized that I was fighting for my life in the most literal sense. Marcus and Brittany weren't just greedy. They were calculating murderers who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to their financial security. The next morning, I called my old friend Dorothy, a retired family court judge, who had remained sharp and resourceful even at 78 years old. Without revealing the full extent of my situation, I asked if she could recommend a trustworthy attorney who specialized in elder abuse cases. "Angel honey, you sound worried," Dorothy said perceptively. "Is everything okay with Marcus and Brittany?" "I'm not sure," I admitted carefully, knowing that Dorothy would hear the underlying tension in my voice. "I think I might need some legal advice about protecting my assets." "Come see me this afternoon," Dorothy said immediately, "and bring any documentation you think might be relevant. If someone is taking advantage of you, we need to address it right away." That conversation marked the beginning of my transformation from victim to warrior. For months, I had been allowing Marcus and Brittany to control my life, accepting their gaslighting and abuse because I loved them and wanted to believe in the goodness of family. But love without respect is manipulation, and trust without honesty is exploitation. As I prepared to visit Dorothy, I made a solemn promise to my late husband's memory and to the strong woman I used to be. I would not go quietly into that psychiatric facility. I would not allow my family's legacy to be stolen by thieves wearing the masks of loved ones. And I would not permit these people to destroy other families the way they had tried to destroy mine. The real Angel Parker was about to emerge from hiding, and she was ready for war. Dorothy's house on Maple Avenue had always been my sanctuary during the most difficult periods of my life. When my husband died, when Marcus was struggling through medical school, when the loneliness of widowhood threatened to overwhelm me, Dorothy's kitchen table had been the place where I found wisdom and comfort. This afternoon, it would become the command center for my counterattack. I arrived at Dorothy's house carrying a manila folder containing printed copies of every photograph I had taken. Dorothy took one look at my face and immediately put on her reading glasses, transforming from concerned friend to experienced legal professional. "Show me everything," she said simply, and I spread the evidence across her dining room table like pieces of a complex puzzle. For the next 2 hours, Dorothy examined each document with the methodical precision that had made her one of Connecticut's most respected family court judges. She studied the forged medical records, the jewelry theft documentation, the financial statements, and the life insurance papers without speaking. When she finally looked up, her expression was grim. "Angel, this is far worse than simple elder abuse," she said quietly. "What you've uncovered is a sophisticated conspiracy to commit fraud, theft, and potentially murder. Your son could face federal charges if we can prove the extent of his medical fraud." "What do I do?" I asked, feeling overwhelmed by the magnitude of the evidence before us. "First, we need to get you medical testing to prove you're being drugged," Dorothy explained. "I'm going to call Dr. Patricia Williams at Hartford Hospital. She specializes in toxicology and elder abuse cases. She can run comprehensive blood and hair tests that will show exactly what substances are in your system." Dorothy made the phone call immediately, and Dr. Williams agreed to see me the following morning under complete confidentiality. The hair follicle test would reveal any drugs I had been given over the past 3 months, while blood work would show current levels of sedatives or other substances. "Second," Dorothy continued, "we need to document everything in real time. I'm going to give you a small recording device that looks like a hearing aid. You'll wear it constantly and record every interaction with Marcus and Brittany. Connecticut is a one-party consent state, so these recordings will be admissible in court." She retrieved a tiny electronic device from her desk drawer, showing me how to operate the nearly invisible recorder. The technology was remarkably advanced for something so small, capable of capturing clear audio for up to 12 hours before needing to be recharged. "Third, and most importantly, you need to continue pretending to be confused and helpless," Dorothy warned. "If Marcus and Brittany suspect that you know about their plan, they might accelerate their timeline or become violent." The psychiatric facility appointment on Tuesday gives us a clear deadline, but we need to use that time wisely. Over the next 3 days, I became a master of deception. I continued dumping my morning coffee down the drain while acting appropriately confused and disoriented. I recorded every conversation capturing Marcus discussing my deteriorating condition with colleagues on the phone and Brittany complaining to her friends about the burden of caring for me. The recordings revealed details about their conspiracy that I hadn't discovered in my searches. Marcus had been telling his medical colleagues that I was becoming aggressive and paranoid, laying groundwork for involuntary commitment. Brittany had been researching private care facilities in other states' places where I would be isolated from anyone who might advocate for my well-being. Most disturbingly, I overheard a phone conversation between Marcus and someone he called Dr. Harrison that confirmed my worst suspicions. They discussed adjusting my medication regimen to ensure I would be compliant during the psychiatric evaluation. Dr. Harrison suggested that a mild overdose of sedatives could create the appearance of a serious medical emergency that would justify immediate hospitalization. Once she's stabilized in the psychiatric ward, we can begin the competency evaluation process, Dr. Harrison explained. With her documented history of cognitive decline and the medical emergency, the court will fast-track the guardianship petition. And if there are complications during treatment? Marcus asked, his voice coldly clinical. Sometimes elderly patients don't respond well to psychiatric medications, especially when they have underlying health conditions that weren't properly diagnosed. Dr. Harrison replied with chilling professional detachment. I realized that Dr. Harrison wasn't actually a psychiatrist at all, but rather a co-conspirator helping Marcus create false medical justification for my disappearance. The depth of their planning was breathtaking and terrifying. Dr. Williams's test results confirmed everything I had suspected. My blood showed significant levels of lorazepam, a powerful anti-anxiety medication that could cause confusion, memory loss, and disorientation in elderly patients. Hair follicle analysis revealed that I had been receiving regular doses of the drug for over 4 months, with levels that gradually increased over time. This dosage pattern is consistent with systematic poisoning, Dr. Williams explained during our confidential consultation. Someone has been carefully calibrating the amount to create cognitive impairment without triggering obvious medical symptoms. This level of precision suggests medical knowledge. Armed with this scientific proof, Dorothy and I developed a comprehensive strategy for exposing Marcus and Brittany while protecting my safety. We would need to coordinate with law enforcement, but timing would be critical. If we moved too early, they might destroy evidence or flee. If we waited too long, I might end up in their psychiatric facility with no way to communicate the truth. Dorothy contacted Detective Sarah Martinez with the Connecticut State Police, who specialized in elder abuse and financial crimes. Detective Martinez reviewed our evidence and agreed to provide surveillance support, but explained that they needed to catch Marcus and Brittany in the act of committing additional crimes to ensure successful prosecution. We need them to incriminate themselves on record, Detective Martinez explained during a secret meeting at Dorothy's house. The evidence you've gathered is compelling, but defense attorneys could argue that the medical records were legitimate and the jewelry sales were authorized. We need clear recordings of them admitting to drugging you and stealing your property. The plan we developed was risky but necessary. I would continue my performance as the confused, helpless mother-in-law while wearing the recording device constantly. On Monday night, the evening before my scheduled psychiatric evaluation, Dorothy would call the house with fabricated news about a family emergency that required immediate financial resources. The emergency would be designed to pressure Marcus and Brittany into revealing their true financial situation and their plans for my money. If they thought they needed immediate cash to handle a crisis, they might discuss accessing my accounts illegally or accelerating their timeline for my incapacitation. Meanwhile, Detective Martinez would position surveillance teams around the house to document any evidence tampering or suspicious activities. If Marcus and Brittany made any moves to destroy documents or prepare for my psychiatric evaluation, law enforcement would be ready to intervene. But first, I had one more piece of evidence to gather. During my systematic searches, I had discovered that Brittany kept a second jewelry box hidden in the basement storage room. This box contained items that she hadn't yet sold, pieces she was apparently saving for emergency cash needs. On Sunday afternoon, while Marcus took the twins to a baseball game and Brittany went shopping, I carefully photographed the contents of this hidden collection. What I found confirmed that their theft operation was even more extensive than I had realized. In addition to my family jewelry, the box contained pieces that belonged to other people, a wedding ring engraved with names I didn't recognize, antique brooches that looked like family heirlooms, even a military medal that clearly belonged to someone's grandfather. I realized that Marcus and Brittany weren't just targeting me. They were operating a broader theft ring, possibly victimizing other elderly patients from Marcus's medical practice. The scope of their criminal activity was staggering, and I began to understand why they were so desperate to eliminate me as a potential witness. That evening, as I prepared dinner and maintained my facade of confused helplessness, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed in just 1 week. 7 days ago, I had been a victim, confused and frightened by my apparent cognitive decline, grateful for my family's care despite their obvious impatience with my limitations. Now I was a woman with a mission, armed with evidence of criminal conspiracy and supported by professionals who believed in justice. The transformation hadn't been easy. Pretending to be helpless while knowing the truth required enormous self-control. Smiling at people who were planning to kill me demanded acting skills I never knew I possessed. But every time I felt my resolve weakening, I thought about the other victims whose jewelry I had found in Brittany's collection. I thought about elderly patients who might be receiving the same treatment I had endured, isolated and confused while their families robbed them blind. I thought about Emma and Ethan, innocent children being raised by parents who saw human beings as sources of revenue rather than people deserving of love and respect. Tomorrow would bring the most challenging performance of my life. I needed to convince Marcus and Brittany that I was completely unaware of their conspiracy while secretly recording evidence that would send them to prison for decades. The stakes couldn't be higher, and failure would mean not just my own destruction, but the continued victimization of vulnerable seniors throughout our community. As I lay in bed that night listening to Marcus and Brittany discuss their final preparations for my psychiatric evaluation, I whispered a prayer for strength, wisdom, and justice. Tomorrow, the real Angel Parker would finally fight back. Monday morning arrived with deceptive normalcy. Marcus kissed my forehead at breakfast and reminded me about Tuesday's doctor visit, his voice filled with fake concern. Brittany bustled around the kitchen preparing the twins' lunchboxes while humming cheerfully as if she wasn't planning to help murder me within 24 hours. I played my role perfectly, asking confused questions about the appointment and expressing worry about leaving the children. "Are you sure I need to go to this doctor?" I asked, with just the right amount of elderly anxiety. "I feel fine today. Mom, Dr. Harrison specifically requested this evaluation." Marcus explained patiently, using the tone he might use with a particularly slow child. "She wants to make sure we're managing your condition properly. It's just a short visit." What neither of them knew was that I had discovered something even more shocking during my weekend investigation. Hidden in Marcus's medical bag, which he kept locked in his car trunk, I had found additional evidence that transformed this from a family betrayal into a federal crime. Saturday night, while they were attending Brittany's company party, I had carefully picked the lock on Marcus's car, using skills I learned from my late father, who had been a locksmith. Inside his medical bag were unmarked prescription bottles containing controlled substances that weren't prescribed to any legitimate patients. The bottles contained oxycodone, Adderall, and lorazepam, exactly the types of medications that were being sold illegally online for enormous profits. Shipping labels hidden in his glove compartment revealed that Marcus had been mailing these substances to buyers across multiple states, using false return addresses and fictional patient names. I had photographed everything meticulously, then called Dorothy with the shocking news. Her response was immediate and decisive. "Angel, this is a federal drug trafficking operation. We need to contact the FBI immediately." Within hours, Dorothy had connected me with Special Agent Catherine Rodriguez, who specialized in prescription drug trafficking cases involving medical professionals. Agent Rodriguez explained that the FBI had been investigating a nationwide network of doctors who were illegally prescribing and distributing controlled substances, and Marcus's operation fit the pattern perfectly. "We've been trying to identify the source of illegal prescriptions in this region for over a year." Agent Rodriguez told me during a secret meeting at Dorothy's house on Sunday evening. "Your evidence could help us shut down an entire criminal network that's been flooding communities with dangerous drugs." The federal investigation added new urgency and complexity to our situation. Agent Rodriguez wanted to use my access to Marcus's operation to gather additional evidence about his drug trafficking network, but that meant extending my dangerous performance for several more days. "I know this is asking a lot," Agent Rodriguez said sympathetically, "but if we can document Marcus's entire operation, we can prevent these drugs from reaching countless potential victims. You're in a unique position to help us save lives." I agreed without hesitation, understanding that my personal safety was less important than stopping a criminal enterprise that was destroying families throughout New England. We developed a revised plan that would expose both the elder abuse conspiracy and the drug trafficking operation simultaneously. Dorothy would make her emergency phone call as scheduled, but Agent Rodriguez would also be monitoring all communications from surveillance vehicles positioned throughout our neighborhood. If Marcus and Brittany made any moves that suggested immediate danger to my safety, federal agents would intervene immediately. Monday evening brought the most nerve-wracking performance of my entire life. I sat in the living room knitting a baby blanket for my church charity group when Dorothy's call came exactly at 7:30 as planned. "Angel, honey, I'm so sorry to bother you," Dorothy said loudly enough for Marcus and Brittany to overhear. "There's been a terrible accident. My grandson Tommy was in a car crash in Boston, and he needs emergency surgery immediately. The hospital is demanding $25,000 upfront before they'll operate, and my savings account is tied up in investment funds." I clutched the phone with trembling hands, playing the role of devastated friend and grandmother figure. "Oh, Dorothy, how terrible. What can I do to help? I know this is a huge favor, but could you possibly lend me the money? I'll pay you back as soon as I can access my investments. But Tommy needs surgery tonight or he might not survive." Marcus and Brittany had stopped pretending not to listen. They stood in the kitchen doorway exchanging meaningful glances while I continued my emotional conversation with Dorothy. "Of course I want to help Tommy," I said tearfully, "but I'm not sure how to access that much money so quickly. Would I need to go to the bank? Can someone help me figure out the procedures?" "Don't worry about the details right now," Dorothy replied. "Just tell me if you're willing to help and we'll figure out the logistics tomorrow." "Absolutely," I declared firmly. Tommy is like family to me. I'll do whatever it takes. After hanging up, I sat quietly for several minutes, allowing Marcus and Brittany to process what they had just heard. Finally, Marcus approached with his most compassionate bedside manner. Mom, that's very generous of you, but $25,000 is a significant amount of money, he said carefully. Are you sure you have that much available in your accounts? I think so, I replied uncertainly. I have that certificate of deposit from when I sold the house, and there's my savings account. I've never needed to withdraw a large amount before. Brittany joined the conversation with false concern. Angel, we should be very careful about this. Sometimes people take advantage of generous seniors with fake emergency stories. Are you absolutely certain that Dorothy really needs this money? I looked appropriately confused and worried. Dorothy would never lie to me about something so serious. Tommy is her only grandson. But you're right that I don't know much about banking procedures for large withdrawals. Why don't you let Marcus handle the financial arrangements? Brittany suggested smoothly. He understands banking and legal requirements much better than we do. If you give him power of attorney, he can make sure Dorothy gets the money quickly without you having to worry about complicated paperwork. The recording device hidden in my collar captured every word as Marcus and Brittany revealed their true intentions. They weren't concerned about protecting me from fraud. They were excited about the opportunity to gain legal control over my finances using this manufactured emergency as justification. That's a wonderful idea, I agreed eagerly. Marcus, would you handle everything for me? I trust you completely, and I don't want Tommy to suffer while we're dealing with paperwork. Marcus's smile was genuinely warm for the first time in months, but I now understood that his happiness came from anticipating theft rather than from helping his family. Of course, Mom. I'll take care of everything. We'll need to visit the bank first thing in the morning to set up the power of attorney, and then I can handle the money transfer immediately. But what about my doctor's appointment on Tuesday? I asked innocently. We might need to postpone that slightly. Marcus replied, his mind clearly focused on accessing my money rather than maintaining his medical charade. Getting help for Tommy is more important right now. Brittany nodded enthusiastically. Besides, you've been having such a good week. Maybe the doctor visit can wait until after we handle this emergency. After they went upstairs, I sat alone in the living room marveling at how quickly they had abandoned their psychiatric facility plan when presented with an easier opportunity to steal my money. Their willingness to postpone my supposedly urgent medical treatment revealed that they had never believed I was actually sick. But my satisfaction was short-lived. Through the baby monitor that Brittany used to listen for the twins, I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. $25,000 isn't nearly enough, Brittany was saying urgently. We owe almost $40,000 in credit card debt, plus the money we borrowed from your drug contacts. If we're going to disappear, we need to clean out her entire savings account. Once I have power of attorney, I can access everything, Marcus replied confidently. The certificate of deposit, the checking account, even her life insurance policy if we structure it correctly. What about the old lady she's going to notice if all her money disappears? That's why we still need the psychiatric facility, Marcus explained with chilling calculation. After I transfer her money tomorrow, we'll take her straight to Dr. Harrison for her emergency evaluation. By the time anyone realizes what happened, she'll be legally incompetent and will be in a non-extradition country. And if she becomes a problem before we can leave, Dr. Harrison has already prepared the medication protocol for that scenario. One injection and Angel Parker will have a tragic heart attack brought on by the stress of losing her life savings to financial fraud. Very sad, but these things happen to elderly victims of investment scams. I sat in stunned silence as the full scope of their final plan became clear. They intended to steal my money in the morning, murder me by evening, and flee the country before anyone discovered their crimes. The elaborate psychiatric facility charade had been just one option among many. But what Marcus and Brittany didn't know was that FBI agents were recording their conversation from surveillance vehicles parked throughout our neighborhood. Special Agent Rodriguez had assured me that federal agents would be monitoring all communications in and around our house from Monday evening forward. As I prepared for bed, I reflected on the ironic timing of their conversation. In less than 12 hours, Marcus and Brittany would discover that their victims had been fighting back longer than they ever imagined. The confused, helpless mother-in-law they had been manipulating and poisoning was about to become the catalyst for their complete destruction. I fell asleep that night with a smile on my face, knowing that justice was finally within reach. Tuesday morning brought the performance of my lifetime. I woke early and prepared breakfast with extra care, knowing this would be the last meal I ever cooked for Marcus and Brittany as their victim. By tonight, they would be in federal custody, and I would be free. At exactly 8:30 as planned, Dorothy called with additional urgency about Tommy's condition. The doctors need the money by noon, or they'll have to transfer him to a different hospital, she announced dramatically. Angel, I'm so grateful that you're helping, but we need to move quickly. Marcus was already dressed in his best suit, projecting the image of a responsible son helping his confused mother navigate a financial emergency. Don't worry, Dorothy. Mom and I will go to the bank as soon as they open. We'll have the money transferred before noon. As we drove to First National Bank, I maintained my facade of anxious confusion while internally reviewing every detail of our plan. Special Agent Rodriguez had explained that federal agents would be monitoring the bank from multiple locations, ready to intervene the moment Marcus attempted to access my accounts illegally. The bank manager, Mrs. Thompson, greeted us warmly in her private office. How can I help you folks today? My mother needs to set up a power of attorney arrangement, Marcus explained with professional confidence. She wants to help a friend with a medical emergency, but she's been having some cognitive difficulties lately, and she'd prefer that I handle the financial details. Mrs. Thompson looked at me kindly. Mrs. Parker, do you understand what a power of attorney document means? I think so, I replied hesitantly, playing my role perfectly. Marcus handles all the complicated things for me now. I just want to help Dorothy's grandson with his surgery. What Marcus didn't know was that Mrs. Thompson had been briefed by federal agents earlier that morning. The bank had been instructed to proceed normally with our transaction, while covertly documenting everything for evidence purposes. I'll need to review Mrs. Parker's accounts to determine the best way to structure this withdrawal, Mrs. Thompson said professionally. As she pulled up my financial information on her computer, her expression grew concerned. Dr. Marcus, I'm showing some unusual activity on your mother's accounts that we should discuss, she said carefully. There have been several large withdrawals over the past 4 months that weren't processed through our main branch. Marcus's confident demeanor faltered slightly. What kind of withdrawals? Electronic transfers totaling over $30,000, all authorized with Mrs. Parker's access codes. Were you aware of these transactions? I watched Marcus struggle to maintain his composure as he realized that I might have been accessing my own money without his knowledge. The transfers Mrs. Thompson mentioned were fabricated by the FBI to test his reaction, and his response was exactly what Agent Rodriguez had predicted. Mom, you didn't tell me you were making large withdrawals, Marcus said, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. We discussed that you should let me handle your finances because of your confusion. I don't remember making any withdrawals, I said truthfully, looking appropriately bewildered. Are you sure those transactions were authorized by me? Mrs. Thompson's expression grew more serious. The electronic authorizations were made using Mrs. Parker's access codes, but they were initiated from IP addresses that don't match her home computer. This suggests that either Mrs. Parker was using different computers or someone else had access to her banking information. The color drained from Marcus's face as he realized the implications. If the bank suspected unauthorized access to my accounts, they would be required to file suspicious activity reports with federal banking authorities. His entire plan was unraveling before his eyes. Perhaps we should postpone this power of attorney arrangement until we can investigate these irregularities, Mrs. Thompson suggested professionally. I'd like to have our security department review Mrs. Parker's accounts to ensure there hasn't been any fraudulent activity. Marcus stood up abruptly, his medical training telling him to retreat before the situation deteriorated further. Actually, let me discuss this with my mother at home first. We'll come back when we've had time to review her recent financial activities. As we left the bank, I could see panic building behind Marcus's professional facade. His careful plan to access my money legally had been sabotaged by unexpected complications, and he was now facing the possibility of banking investigations that could expose his entire operation. The drive home was tense and silent. Marcus gripped the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white, while I continued playing the confused elderly woman, occasionally asking innocent questions that increased his stress. Did I really make those withdrawals that Mrs. Thompson mentioned? I asked worriedly. I don't remember using any other computers. Don't worry about it, Mom, Marcus replied through gritted teeth. We'll figure everything out when we get home. But when we arrived at the house, Brittany was waiting with news that shattered their remaining composure. She had received a phone call from someone claiming to be FBI agent Rodriguez, requesting a meeting to discuss irregularities in Marcus's prescription practices. They said they've been investigating illegal drug distributions in this area, Brittany whispered urgently as we entered the house. They want to interview you about missing controlled substances from your clinic. Marcus's face went completely pale. What exactly did they say? They mentioned specific medications, oxycodone, Adderall, lorazepam, the same ones you've been... Brittany glanced at me nervously, then lowered her voice even further. The same ones we've been using for our side business. I pretended not to hear their whispered conversation while internally celebrating. Agent Rodriguez was implementing the next phase of our plan, perfectly applying pressure that would force Marcus and Brittany to make desperate decisions. How much time do we have? Marcus asked, his medical training helping him think strategically even under extreme stress. They want to meet tomorrow morning, Brittany replied. But Marcus, if they're investigating the drug operation, they might already know about everything else. The old lady's money, the psychiatric facility, all of it. Marcus looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. Pure hatred mixed with desperate calculation. For the first time, I felt genuine fear as I realized he was considering whether to eliminate me immediately rather than risk my potential testimony. We need to accelerate our timeline, he said quietly. If the FBI is investigating, we have maybe 12 hours before they start making arrests. What about the money? Brittany asked desperately. We can't leave the country without cash. I still have access to the clinic's emergency fund, Marcus replied. It's not as much as we wanted, but it's enough to disappear if we move quickly. As they continued planning their escape, I excused myself to use the bathroom where I activated the emergency signal feature on my recording device. Agent Rodriguez had explained that this silent alarm would immediately alert federal agents to intervene if I felt threatened. Within minutes, I heard cars pulling into our driveway. Through the bathroom window, I could see unmarked federal vehicles surrounding our house. My heart pounded with relief as I realized that help had finally arrived. FBI opened the door immediately. The commanding voice echoed through the house, followed by the thunderous sound of agents surrounding the building. I emerged from the bathroom to find Marcus and Brittany frozen in our living room, their faces reflecting the shock of people who had never considered the possibility of being caught. The recording device had captured every word of their desperate conversation, providing federal agents with real-time evidence of their criminal conspiracy. Dr. Marcus Parker and Mrs. Brittany Parker, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit elder abuse fraud, drug trafficking, and attempted murder. Agent Rodriguez announced as federal agents entered our home with weapons drawn. As the handcuffs clicked around their wrists, Brittany finally looked directly at me with genuine recognition. "You knew," she whispered incredulously. "You knew everything." I stood straight and tall, feeling decades younger as the truth was finally revealed. "I've known for weeks," I replied calmly. "Every conversation, every lie, every crime. I recorded it all." Marcus stared at me with a mixture of disbelief and grudging respect. "You played us perfectly," he said quietly. I never suspected that my confused, helpless mother was capable of such deception. "I learned from the best," I replied, looking directly into his eyes. "You taught me how to lie, how to manipulate, and how to plan systematically for what I wanted. You just never imagined I would use those skills against you." As federal agents led Marcus and Brittany away, I felt a profound sense of justice mixed with overwhelming sadness. The son I had raised and loved was gone, replaced by a criminal who had been willing to murder me for money. But the children sleeping upstairs would now have a chance to grow up with different values, raised by someone who understood the difference between love and exploitation. Agent Rodriguez approached me with a smile of professional satisfaction. "Mrs. Parker, your courage and intelligence have helped us solve multiple federal crimes. Marcus and Brittany will be facing decades in prison, and their drug trafficking network has been completely dismantled." I nodded gratefully, finally allowing myself to feel the full weight of what I had survived. "What happens now? Now you get your life back," Agent Rodriguez replied. "And those beautiful grandchildren get to learn what real family love looks like." 6 months later, I sat in the same courtroom where Marcus and Brittany received their sentences, but this time I was there for a much happier occasion. Judge Patricia Wilson was finalizing my permanent custody of Emma and Ethan, making legal what had already become the most joyful reality of my life. The twins, now 5 years old, sat beside me in their matching navy blue outfits, their faces bright with the security and happiness that comes from being truly loved. They had adjusted to their new life with remarkable resilience, and their personalities had blossomed in ways that proved how much their previous environment had been stifling their natural spirits. Marcus had been sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for drug trafficking, elder abuse conspiracy to commit murder, and medical fraud. His medical license had been permanently revoked, and he would never again have the opportunity to harm vulnerable patients. Brittany received 15 years for conspiracy theft, elder abuse, and money laundering. Neither had shown any remorse during their trials, continuing to blame me for their downfall even as evidence of their crimes mounted. The drug trafficking investigation had led to the arrest of 12 other medical professionals across 3 states, including the fake Dr. Harrison, who had been helping Marcus develop his elder abuse protocols. The network they had created was responsible for distributing illegal prescription drugs worth over $2 million, contributing to the opioid crisis that was devastating communities throughout New England. But for me, the most satisfying aspect of their convictions was the complete recovery of all stolen property. Every piece of jewelry that Brittany had sold was tracked down and returned to me, including items belonging to other elderly victims who had been targeted by their theft ring. The investigation revealed that Marcus and Brittany had been systematically robbing patients from his medical practice for over 2 years. I had moved back into my restored Victorian house on Elm Street, which felt like coming home after a long and terrible journey. The house was filled with laughter again as Emma and Ethan explored every room claimed their bedrooms and helped me plan the garden where they would learn to grow vegetables and flowers. The lawsuit settlement from the bank, the medical practice, and various insurance companies had provided enough money to ensure the twins' future security. I had established college funds for both children that would cover their education completely, while also setting aside resources for their emotional counseling and any other support they might need as they processed their parents' betrayal. My friend Dorothy had been instrumental in helping me navigate the legal and emotional complexities of sudden parenthood in my 70s. Together, we had created a support network of neighbors, friends, and professionals who understood that family is defined by love and commitment rather than biological connection. I had also fulfilled my promise to help other elder abuse victims by establishing the Parker Foundation for Senior Protection. The organization provided free legal assistance counseling and advocacy services for elderly people who were being exploited by family members or caregivers. Within 6 months, we had helped over 40 seniors escape abusive situations and recover stolen assets. The foundation also worked with law enforcement agencies to train officers and social workers in recognizing the signs of elder abuse. Too many seniors suffered in silence because they were ashamed of being victimized by people they loved or because they didn't know where to turn for help. Our outreach programs helped vulnerable adults understand their rights and options. Dr. Williams had become both a friend and a professional ally, helping me understand the long-term effects of the sedatives I had been given and supporting my complete recovery. The cognitive symptoms disappeared entirely within weeks of stopping the drugged coffee, confirming that my mental faculties had never been impaired by anything other than deliberate poisoning. Emma and Ethan were thriving in their new schools and had formed wonderful friendships with children whose families valued kindness and honesty. They occasionally asked about their parents, and I answered their questions truthfully, but age-appropriately explaining that sometimes people make very bad choices that hurt the people they should love most. "Grandma Angel," Emma said one evening as we read bedtime stories, "are you going to take care of us forever?" "As long as you want me to, sweetheart," I replied, kissing her forehead, "and probably even longer than that." Ethan snuggled closer to me on the big chair we shared for story time. "I like living with you better than before," he announced with 5-year-old honesty. "You don't yell and you make really good cookies." These conversations broke my heart and healed it simultaneously. The children had been living in an environment of tension and dysfunction for their entire lives, but they were resilient enough to embrace the love and stability I could offer them. I had also reconnected with my own sense of purpose and identity. For too many months, I had allowed Marcus and Brittany to convince me that I was a burden, a confused old woman whose only value lay in the services I could provide and the money I could contribute. Their systematic abuse had almost succeeded in making me believe I was worthless. But fighting back had reminded me of who I really was: a strong, intelligent woman with decades of experience, valuable skills, and the wisdom that comes from surviving life's challenges. I was a registered nurse who had helped countless patients heal. I was a mother who had raised a successful child, even though he had ultimately chosen to reject the values I tried to teach him. I was a widow who had built a meaningful life after devastating loss. Most importantly, I was now a grandmother who understood that love means protecting the people you care about, not exploiting them. Emma and Ethan would grow up knowing the difference between healthy relationships and manipulation, between genuine care and selfish use. The house on Elm Street had become a gathering place for friends and neighbors who appreciated my cooking and enjoyed the children's energy. Dorothy spent most Sunday afternoons with us helping Emma and Ethan with art projects while sharing stories about their grandfather and the adventures we had shared over the decades. Agent Rodriguez visited occasionally, bringing updates about ongoing investigations and prosecutions related to Marcus and Brittany's criminal network. She had become something of a hero to Emma and Ethan, who were fascinated by her stories about catching bad guys and protecting innocent people. Mrs. Parker, Agent Rodriguez said during her most recent visit, "Your case has become a textbook example for training programs across the country. You've shown other victims that it's never too late to fight back against abuse, and you've helped law enforcement understand how sophisticated these criminal operations can become." I was proud of that legacy, but I was even more proud of the future I was building with Emma and Ethan. They were learning to garden, to cook, to read voraciously, and to treat all people with respect and kindness. They were developing the character traits that would serve them well throughout their lives, regardless of what challenges they might face. On quiet evenings after the children were asleep, I often reflected on how dramatically my life had changed. A year ago, I had been a victim, confused and frightened by circumstances I didn't understand, grateful for any attention from family members who were secretly planning my destruction. Now I was a survivor, a protector, and an advocate. I had discovered reserves of strength and cunning that I never knew I possessed. I had learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable people who are determined to harm you, even when those people are your own family members. The most important lesson I learned was about the difference between being alone and being lonely. Living with Marcus and Brittany, I had been surrounded by people, but completely isolated from genuine human connection. Now living with Emma and Ethan, I was part of a real family based on mutual respect, honest communication, and unconditional love. I want to end my story with a message for anyone who might be experiencing what I went through. Elder abuse is more common than most people realize, and it often comes from the people we trust most. If you feel confused, isolated, or controlled by family members who claim to be helping you, trust your instincts. Seek help from professionals who specialize in these situations. Remember that real love never requires you to sacrifice your dignity, your safety, or your financial security. People who genuinely care about you will respect your autonomy and treat you with kindness even when they're frustrated or stressed. Most importantly, it's never too late to fight back. Age doesn't make you weak or helpless unless you choose to accept weakness and helplessness. I was 71 years old when I began my battle against Marcus and Brittany, and I discovered that experience and determination can be more powerful than youth and manipulation. Emma and Ethan are now 6 years old, and they call me Grandma Angel without any memory of the time when their parents treated me like a servant. They're learning to be strong, kind, and honest people who will never allow anyone to abuse them or the people they love. That transformation from victim to victor, from despair to hope, from isolation to genuine family love, represents the best possible outcome for my story. Justice was served, criminals were punished, and innocent children were protected from growing up in an environment that would have taught them terrible lessons about how people should treat each other. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't revenge against people who have wronged you, but rather the creation of something beautiful and meaningful from the ashes of their destruction. Emma and Ethan are my greatest victory, and every day with them reminds me that love really can triumph over evil when good people refuse to give up. Now I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where family members or people you trusted were taking advantage of your kindness? How did you recognize what was happening, and what steps did you take to protect yourself? Your experiences could help someone else who might be facing similar challenges. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking this video to help it reach other people who might need to hear this message. Subscribe to our channel for more stories about courage, justice, and the power of fighting back against those who would harm vulnerable people. And please share this video with friends or family members who might benefit from understanding the warning signs of elder abuse. Thank you for listening to my story and for supporting survivors who have found the strength to speak their truth. Remember that you're never too old, too confused, or too isolated to deserve respect, protection, and genuine love. Keep fighting for the life you deserve, and never let anyone convince you that you're worth less than complete dignity and care. Until next time, this is Angel Parker reminding you that sometimes the most powerful weapon against evil is simply refusing to be its victim any longer.